fact that we are having this debate and that we are discussing the consequences, in my opinion, speaks well for the club and its supporters.
It's so easy to hold up a black sheet of paper when we do the TIFO in the stadium for the Holocaust Remembrance Day. It was an impressive one, and again this season. It's so easy to hold that up. But the question is, what does it mean in everyday's life?
Welcome to the second part of a two-part episode on professional soccer clubs and the work of remembering that started us in St. Pauli, at FC St. Pauli in the German Bundesliga at their museum, and ends us now with the big clubs and big questions of what right remembering looks like in professional soccer today and what it can look like. If you have not listened to part 1 from 2 weeks ago, please do. I think the 2 episodes do tie together, and we won't recap everything here. The whole journey last and this episode has 3 guests. Celina Albertz, who is a researcher and also the curating team of the FC St. Pauli Museum. We heard from her 2 weeks ago on the research that she did on St. Pauli's matchday song, Das Herz von St. Pauli, the heart of St. Pauli. Heart, there it was. And the discussion started by that research into who the composer was and the lyricist and the performer was and their connections to the Nazis and what that means for the role of that song at the club and also her work at the museum. Then it's Sönke Goldbeck, who is the board chair and the director of the museum, who we will also hear from today again, and Felipe Tobar, who is assistant professor in the Parks, Rec and Tourism Management Department at Clemson Universit in South Carolina, founder of the Football Studies YouTube channel, and also the mastermind of a new documentary movie on public memory and football. Link is in the show notes. We will also and especially talk about that movie and his research work today. If you want to know more about St. Pauli, episode 26, 2 social workers from the club were on, and Felipe has also been with us before in episode 31. We are picking up right where we left off, moving a little bit away from FC St. Pauli and into bigger questions of professional soccer and memory. What are clubs doing with their museum, with tourists that are visiting, and how to communicate their story to their own fans as well. And Felipe was talking about the differences that he has observed between different countries in that.
In my encounters, in my research involving clubs in Spain, Portugal, Germany, England, United States, Brazil, with the exception of Germany, I would say all these other societies and respectively their football clubs, they have this understanding that sports and politics cannot mix. They do know, they are aware that they do mix, but they intentionally try to separate these two concepts with a particular reason in their mind.
Sorry, let me briefly interrupt here. Would you say, or do you want to restate it? Germany is the one exception to the rule here? Did I misunderstand you?
The clubs that I have investigated in Germany, yes. And then I'm talking about FC St. Pauli, Werder Bremen, Borussia Dortmund, Bayern Munich. Of course, we have, particularly in the east of the country, clubs like RB Leipzig or Dresden, in which this discourse around cultural remembrance and politics are not as open as other clubs. But in every other club that I have visited, and that includes Real Madrid, Sporting Lisbon, Benfica, Manchester United, Liverpool, they consider bringing up to discussions their respective difficult heritage, something that would divide the fan base. And that will be very, very problematic for their commercial and brand image interests. So there is this understanding that mixing politics and football will divide their fan bases and not allow them to fulfill their commercial objectives, while in these clubs that I have mentioned in Germany, not talking about those past and not engaging in politics is actually something harmful for the brands. So it's completely the opposite case. But I would like to emphasize that they are aware of these relationships between sports and politics. It's undeniable. We've seen in other spheres, like particularly now in how geopolitics is playing a huge part in football. And if you just bring Saudi or Qatar, now Rwanda and Arsenal, you have so many examples, right? To point out. So I would like to emphasize that they intentionally not allowed that to be mixed, particularly in their public relationships channels, as well as in their museums and stadium tours.
What are your thoughts about the case of the song that we started with before we turn to your movie more broadly?
I think the decision made by the club to temporarily suspend the song was predictable and honors the history of the club in terms of the cultural remembrance that has been done since 20 years ago.
Yeah,
agree. And now this process of bringing that to the AGM is also, there's so many cases inside the club that legitimates this decision. And ultimately, I think the democracy that the club has set in place will have the best decision. I saw critics around the fact that the song has no longer a Nazi meaning.
Yeah.
So there are no ties from some of that supports the continuation. But as Sönke mentioned, is to what extent can we separate the political ideologies of those that wrote the song from the song, right? Like, can we detach it?
Strictly speaking, they're right. The song does not have a Nazi meaning.
Mm-hmm.
But there's more layers to that when words come out of your mouth, and more context to those when you sing them in Hamburg and on the terraces of St. Pauli in particular.
Exactly. And I think it's very similar to what happened with Willem Koch. Willem Koch, initially, as Sönke mentioned, had supported his Jewish partner. But a couple decades later, actually, there's one particular, I think it's a short on YouTube or on FC St. Pauli's Instagram, where everyone can watch, in which a former player was sharing an episode within the locker room in which Willem Koch said something along those lines, long life to Poland, in making the connection with how good were the times in when the Nazis occupied Poland. And they brought that back in time, saying that was the right decision to change the name of the stadium. But again, even in 1997, 1998, when they renamed the stadium, there were dozens of club board members that resigned from the board of directors in protest to renaming of the stadium. So contrary to what we think, FC St. Pauli has never been a place in which everyone agrees with those type of decisions. But it is a place in which fans have the right to discuss, in contrary to what we normally do not see in other clubs.
Yeah. Sönke, anything to correct here, since we talked about you for a while here, not with you?
Well, not sure. I think it was people on the supervisory board. It's only a small correction. No, I mean the that conflict was really, I think it shows the complexities in football clubs. I think one of the beautiful things that are usually only put forward in a positive way is that football clubs give some sort of continuity. You know, this whole thing about heritage is, it's basically, it carries a lot of heritage because it's a long continuity. If we look at the roots, then it's like 163 years now, basically since 1862. And you're all part of that. And it's also some things that make it so interesting to work for that, or to be a part of that, be it as a supporter, as a member, as an activist, as an employee, that you might be only a very small thing in the whole system, but you built on something that people 160 years ago had started, and it will hopefully continue for another 160 years. And it's also a melting pot, so many people coming together, and doesn't really matter what you do, other things you do in life, as long as you are a good comrade on the pitch, as long as you support together, as you build things together, make social things happen. And it's generally a positive thing, but it's also that it covers up some of the cruel things of history. That suddenly it's more important that you are a good comrade and so on in everyday life, in the club, in life of the social life of the club, such as Otto Wolff, and everybody forgets about his role as a Nazi, and. Not a topic, it's and even that's the thing that in the early 90s, when he died, he was honored with an eulogy in the club paper, where they wrote about his really good work he did for club and country, and even in dark times, which was obviously the Nazi time. And it's like that was early 90s, when St. Pauli was already known for an actively anti-fascist, anti-discrimination support. That's crazy, and that was also then part of that. I mean, it took even 20 more years to that an AGM of St. Pauli said, okay, we revoke that golden needle of honor of Otto Wolff. So all these presidents, all the people had the chance to say, they knew what these guys did. They knew it because they were friends with them and so on, and they didn't make it an issue. They didn't try to any kind of reconciliation. They didn't try to discuss it in the open. They didn't apologize. There was no criticism about that. And that's also something that is the negative side, I think, of this continuity of football clubs or similar things, that these things it's become are covered up. That's not a topic anymore. That's one of that guy we researched a biography of, Max Kulik. When he was in a military regiment football team during the First World War, he played together with a Nazi later to become Nazi leader of someone who. He played together with Tolhada of HSV Hamburg, who was at a concentration camp, working there. So he was a full-on Nazi, but years earlier they all played together and were comrades. And so it's a positive thing for football clubs, having this continuity and being a melting pot for everyone, breaking down social boundaries and all that stuff. But it can have this negative thing that also these negative sides are being covered up, and people don't make them an issue.
I mean, this is the difference, though, right? Do you conceive of the football club as a kind of a bubble apart? Often as an apolitical bubble apart, or do you conceive of it as a space that widens and can aid and is in connection with broader society and also accountable to the community that it's in? What future can we expect for this debate? Probably over the course of this year. Sönke, what do you think is going to happen, and what's the timetable for a decision? Do you have one?
I think we still need some more weeks to do proper research. Things take time. That's part of that.
A few weeks. I'm sorry. I'm surprised. That's not a lot.
A few weeks can be a few months, but generally
researchers there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't make sense to postpone that for a full year or so, So,
right. Well, you also don't have to teach, like Felipe and I do. You can just do full-on research.
Yeah, but Celina already did a proper research, and before she did the podcast, so that is widening these things, and then we will come up with that, and we'll publish it, and will be some kind of event where people can come there and talk and discuss in the open and public, or let's say in a setting that where everybody can make their voice heard, and then there will be a decision at some point. But I think the more relevant question is how we actually discuss these things and what is the outcome. The outcome is will we continue to sing the song or not?
Right.
But the more important thing is how do we deal with these things from the past that affect us? It's so easy to hold up a black sheet of paper when we do the tifo in the stadium for the Holocaust Remembrance Day. It was an impressive one, and again this season,
Yes,
and. And it's a tradition by now, basically. It's so easy to hold that up. But the question is, what does it mean in everyday's life? And how critical are we about what we use as our symbols, more or less?
Which includes that song, yeah.
Das Herz von St. Pauli, das ist meine Heimat. In Hamburg, da bin ich zu Haus. Der Hafen, die Lichter.
Felipe, is St. Pauli ahead of its time? Or will it remain a special case, you think? What's your hunch of where other clubs that you have encountered are heading in dealing with their past?
Good question. It looks like St. Pauli is indeed ahead of its time in comparison to other clubs. It has always been mentioned as an example that other clubs follow in terms of this commitment to deal with the past. So that's, again, it's history. St. Pauli was the first one to ban neo-Nazi and racist chants officially from its stadium. This has this pioneering kind of nature within this left-wing fan base to deal with the past. So I think St. Pauli is of course an example to be followed. And if we can extend it to other societies, there's still no research on how football clubs in South America have experienced authoritarian regimes, like in Brazil, Argentina, Chile. And I'm quite sure once they start digging into that, they will look to the Nazi past. And as we know, the Holocaust is already a concept that is used to compare those type of events. And of course, I think the work that has been done and documented and also published around FC St. Pauli, and maybe also by Munich. There's something published in English, Borussia Dortmund as well. They will be used as guides to orient what to do and with the past.
Do you see work from those clubs, voices from those clubs being amplified in English? Are clubs outside of Germany looking at that work and think, yeah, maybe we should consider this too? Are fan groups looking at that work and thinking, this is a discussion worth having?
Interesting question. I do know there are a lot of researchers in Germany publishing around cultural remembrance, but mostly in German.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm not sure, but I may be one of the fewest that.
Well, I was just going to say there is a researcher at Clemson that's trying to bridge that gap a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So we try to translate what those folks in Germany are doing. Also to educate, people from other countries that have faced similar things in the past on how to start discussing those difficult heritages. And of course, the main barrier is it's how German football is structured in comparison to to other football federations.
Yes, our familiar topic, right? 50+1 member of the club.
Mm-hmm.
Versus the various
the franchise model now.
Yeah, franchise, various corporate ownership models. Yes.
We actually still 100+0.
St. Pauli is 100+0. Yes, good.
100+0 is good. So we have those elements to always bring to the table that can really affect the cultural remembrance. But yes, going back to your original question, I think FC St. Pauli and other clubs, including Werder Bremen, that I think I did not mention, they have things well documented. They have a solid work, not just linked with their respective museums, but with the fun projects. Those fun projects, they really engage in this type of historical revisionism and public memory as well.
What do you mean by historical revisionism? You mean imagining history differently or revising historical consensus? Just to be clear here.
Revising historical consensus.
Yeah.
Because history is always changing, right?
Yeah.
Like the official history always changes depending on the new evidences that we collect with new research.
No, this is an ongoing conversation. The job of history is not to, like a natural scientist, lay out the facts and let them speak for themselves. Our job is as well to interpret, to spark debate, to frame that and to connect dots. Yeah,
exactly. And I think FC St. Pauli Museum and the folks there are a good example of that. They literally have done what we call subaltern heritage. It's kind of a bottom-up revolution within the club to change the official history, the official narratives that have always been kind of promoted by the club.
Yeah, or at least assumed, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So now we have, if we look back 20 years, nothing that Zonk has mentioned in terms of Otto Wolff, Willem Koch, the memorials that came out, that would never be possible without looking in detail in how history has been created and told, right? So this work is really pivotal, and I think will influence a lot of different fan bases.
What, and this question goes both of you.
May I just add one thing?
Of course you may add one. Or two.
I just made, obviously I'm kind of proud of what we did in recent time, especially on rather low resources, but it's also that obviously some clubs and also some supporters might have been a bit ahead of us when it comes to Nazi time and Jewish heritage. For example, FC Bayern München and their Shikaria Ultra Group, they were very earlier than us, definitely. Did brilliant work there. And
friendship, we should say, with your ultras up there. But they definitely were very early there with putting Landauer as a symbol for that, back on the table, basically putting back there, and the history was almost forgotten. And there's an episode on that as well. I'm blanking on the number now, but
perfect. And then there's also like even Hamburg, our big rival. They did some good work early on as well. They lack resources. I think right now it's a bit of a disaster, or it doesn't look very that they have a good organization right now. That's a bit of a problem in a club that is changing a lot. But they did very good work, and they have the advantage of a full archive. They still have all the club publications from the Nazi time and even before. While we have at FC St. Pauli, almost everything's lost. So a lot of stuff has to be researched indirectly through other sources that talk about FC St. Pauli, but we have very little resources.
Okay, so the club archive isn't actually that complete regarding the 30s and 40s.
Hardly anything. That's huge gaps over decades, basically. We have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 publications, but not more. From the very early days, for example, from 1900, we have a big book with almost 1,000 pages as a scan. That's we have some of the club, let's say, magazines or whatever you want to call them, but then especially from the Nazi time and so on, there's hardly anything. So it's very like detective-like work to get stuff from general publications and so on to find information about people.
Yes, but that's where the fun is, I think, in historical work. I don't know.
That
detective kind of thing where you have this hunch that there's got to be something.
Yeah,
there's got to be more to this person, and you search and you find, I don't know, maybe some random newspaper that gives you a way into another name and another organization that leads you closer to the identity of whoever.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, I bet so, but it makes it really much
hard
of an effort, and so also on. It's just, I think, just brilliant work that my colleagues are doing there, digging through in depth through these things and trying to find the bits and pieces to put together. It's not like just this is this pile of club publications and membership lists we just need to get through, and bam, that we have everything. It's really research and buying some stuff that is set to digitize by other people, digitizing our own stuff, and trying to do the detective work, basically.
Yes. Digitization, it reminds me, it used to be so much easier to get travel grants as a historian because stuff was digitized. Here's this printed newspaper. It only exists in this one town. And now you can do research from the other end of the earth. Stuff is...
but Celina's traveling to a couple of cities in Germany as well now because... Yeah, sure, because some stuff's not... We are a bit behind the US.
But if you... Yes, I was just going to say, if you allow me that one pun, digitization and Germany is not always a success story. I think that's fair to say. Let me ask a utilitarian type of question. If somebody is listening who has the ear of club leaders elsewhere, what's in it for a club in engaging in this kind of research? Why should a football club in the 21st century proactively engage with fans like you, Sönke and Celina, who are interested in this research, and then promote it, and make it publicly accessible in the reframing of that club story? What's in it for a club? Why should a club bother? And the question goes to both of you.
Well, if I have to start, I mean, it's a complicated question and obviously philosophical in some parts. One formal answer would be that our supporters and members of the club, so basically the members are what you could call the shareholders, although there's no shares to be held, are mostly the same. So, it's not like there's a differentiation in that kind that there's let's say a British club or so that where you have 1 or 5 owners and they determine the fate of the club. And then you have the outside of that, you have the supporters, but it's the supporters and members we have about 50,000 members. So for those who don't know that much about the club, about 50,000 members, maybe 51,000, a bit more than half of that are what we call the supporting members. They don't do active sports. The other bit less than the half of them are doing active sports, or at least part of a division of the club that does active sports. Yep. So, for example, amateur football, chess, darts, chess, one of the oldest divisions we have, rugby, with our women's rugby is basically one of the most successful in Germany, which says more about maybe rugby in Germany than But generally,
it says something about priorities and the breadth of what's going on at St. Pauli too.
As long as members are interested in that, the club is interested in that. So that's, let's say, a formal answer to that. The other thing is that we obviously feel obligation. We also St. Pauli itself, just like the museum, is a non-profit charitable organization. Yeah. So I personally think that we have a responsibility in our relations to society. And so in trying to fulfill that and be a positive part of society, we should reflect on what we did in the past and try to communicate it as well, because it's in large part a success story that still counts. Because all the thing about changing the club has been fought for, and it was always a fight against discrimination and so on. It was in the more modern times, this what started in '85. More or less, you can't put a date on it, but what started around the middle of the 1980s and goes on till today is basically trying to be better in society, make a positive impact, and that story to be told. And it's also that it doesn't come by itself. It has to be fought for. And looking at the past gives you actually the facts about what happened and what was the difference, what could happen if you don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
I would say, why does that matter, right? That was the question. Why should clubs engage?
From a club's perspective, right? So what's in it for them to engage this story rather than present a smooth, heroic, version of their memory to the public?
Yeah. So I will try to answer that using the lenses of German society and particularly what explains.
Okay, though, if you're going to Germany, then I already know my follow-up question, because it's going to be, what is in it for clubs such as Real Madrid and Liverpool as well?
Yeah, no, I will go.
But let's start in Germany first. Yeah.
Yeah, I will connect at the dots with those clubs. But in Germany, we have this concept of the new temporal regime created by philosopher Aleida Asman, in which, in order to build a future, you have to learn your past. But also encompasses the idea of a past that never passed. So it's a past that's still living in the collective memory and still claiming for justice, still claiming to be discussed. Without this past, we cannot understand how football clubs have evolved. And up to this point that they're very, very and often discussed only through the lenses of commercialization and globalization, without understanding how the club has changed, the different actors that play a part in this particular history. It's actually impossible to learn which type of club is your football team. It is like your perceptions of what my club is always incomplete, right? Because football, as we have been discussing here, it's not just what happens in the pitch. It's not just the lineup. Actually, football is much more rich in what happens outside of the pitch. How many times we have been seeing directors that have so many ties with political regimes, and how these political regimes have somehow influenced the way clubs have created their squads in terms of transfers. Have so many examples about it, or the decision to build a stadium in a particular area of the city and got public financiation to do it.
Yeah.
We normally forget about those things. In Germany particularly, you have this social responsibility that Sönke mentioned, to not allow authoritarian regimes to come back. And we have been seeing now with the AfD in Germany. I think the fight is going to increase in this country, particularly in the next 4 years, when the AfD has a real chance to.
So for those who haven't followed German politics, we need to say here, 2 weeks ago, I think German national federal elections and the right-wing populist party, which in part is officially been found to be right-wing extremists by the constitutional courts, constitutional authorities in Germany, came in the second place behind the Conservative Party in that election. So that is the AfD that Felipe was referring to. So
yeah, alternative for Deutschland, right?
Alternative for Germany.
Yeah. For Germany, yeah. So I think you have these elements in this equation, forcing German football clubs to deal with the Nazi past, in particularly, that we do not necessarily have in other societies like Spanish society or Portuguese society, where the past is still conflictive, is still not well discussed, and there are two opposite narratives claiming to hold what happened in the past. So they're literally battling to hold the power of communicating what happened in particularly the Spanish Civil War, or in Salazar's regime, Franco's regime as well. So these divisions around what happened in the past does not allow the natural engagement of other sectors in those respective societies, including football clubs. But since we have examples in different parts of the world, particularly in Germany, of sometimes of an independent engagement to deal with the past, there's nothing holding clubs like Real Madrid, Sporting, Benfica, Atletico Madrid to start engaging those pasts. So why they do not engage? This is something that I have discussed in my documentary, and we can talk more later.
Well, we can get into it now, if you don't mind. The documentary itself is 35 minutes long, so we probably talk about it longer than
no,
but that is to me, it's partly a question I'm still left with at the end a little bit. Right? What would it take for somebody at Real Madrid to see it would be to the benefit of the community we're building, the transparency within that, the global and increasingly diverse nature of followers, but also to our role in a changing Spain and in a changing Europe to be transparent.
Yeah, there's so many.
I named a few reasons now, but
so many elements playing a role there. I think in terms of Real Madrid to engage in this difficult heritage and bringing to the public that Real Madrid had a communist president named Colonel Ortega in the Spanish Civil War.
Yep.
Or the fact that Bernabeu and Franco hated each other, as contrary to what we normally are told.
Right, and Barcelona is not the single-mindedly anti-fascist club that
exactly. The fact that Barcelona had more Francoists in their board than Real Madrid.
Yep.
I think this, and it's curious, but the sporting success of Real Madrid allows them to avoid this difficult past. Now, if you
shouldn't that create the space to engage it?
It should. It definitely has a space. But Real Madrid has changed its national Spanish Madrileño heritage to a global heritage. And you can see that in the museum with the Galácticos from 2000s and now with Cristiano Ronaldo, Vini Jr.
Yeah.
The museum is really structured into, okay, we have the best trophies. We're the best club in 20th century. We have the best players.
Yeah.
We have the best stadium. And the Tour Bernabeu is the third most visited attraction in Madrid, 1.3 million visitors. So the visitors comes from all parts of the world, more than 100 countries. And definitely these fans are there to see the trophies, to take a selfie with the UEFA Champions League. Plus, the political environment of Spanish politics does not help Real Madrid to engage in this kind of initiative. Remember that after Franco's regime, 1976, they entered in a pact of silence, which was somehow the case for Germany, not officially, but maybe the next 3 decades after the Nazi regime, no one wanted to talk about what happened. Spain is still in this mode. And only the Republicans, the victims, or the descendants of those victims, starting the 1990s, 2000s, really started to bring the past into public discussions, including pushing for the national memory law. Yeah, I think that's the name, in which really tried the recognition of the atrocities committed by Franco's regime. But neither Real Madrid, neither Atletico Madrid or Barcelona have never engaged in these discussions. And when I tour all these three stadiums, I still remember in Atletico Madrid, I was touring with two old ladies. And for those that are not aware, Atletico Madrid was formerly called Atletico Aviación or Atletico Aviation, because it was a team created within the Minister of War.
Yeah, the Air Force.
The Air Force. And so he talked, the tour guide talked a lot about how good they were in that time, because they won several titles at the beginning of Franco's regime. And I asked him, why you're not talking about that was tied with Franco's regime? And he said, I cannot bring that into my narrative because this is still sensitive topic, and these two ladies here would hate that. And the same happened in Real Madrid. There's not many objects to activate, with the exception of the trophies of Copa Generalissimo that is linked with Franco. But even some players that have played for Real Madrid during the Spanish Civil War are not considered to be players in the Spanish Civil War. So it's really control. This pass is really control to not bring any sort of disruption to this global heritage. That is anchoring global titles and global recognition that Real Madrid has built.
Yeah. I mean, what St. Pauli has managed in Germany, maybe certainly FC Bayern too. There's cases from outside as well that come to mind, but those in particular is to combine an engagement, a deep engagement and an honest engagement of the past with a forward-looking vision for the future. And maybe that's what's not part of the kind of global supporter vision that Real is having right now. With St. Pauli and Bayern have managed is we're doing this because our way forward looks like this, and we want to be an inclusive club. And what it means to be a football club today in this community, be accountable to the community, is to engage this. And Sönke, correct me if I'm making this sound way too simple, but there is a connection here between engaging the past and building a sustainable and a vibrant future for the club, and that engaging the past fits the future vision in a way that maybe that doesn't seem that obvious for your Spanish friends that you encountered there. How to connect the dots between a increasingly global followership and that.
And then there's an important question to bring. Will the global fans have a stake in discussions around the national past of Real Madrid? Since 95% of the fan base is international, what is now the importance of the locals in dealing with that? So if the majority of global fans wants to know more about it, will Real Madrid start digging into that? I'm sure will not.
Yeah, but stadium culture too, right? How many people in the stadium in the Bernabeu at any given game are visitors, tourists, for better or for worse, but where there isn't the intense engagement with a local song, such as can happen in Hamburg right now.
Exactly.
An interesting question, because maybe some of these clubs still have as part of their image and that they come from a certain country and associated with certain things, like also English clubs or Spanish clubs and so on, but are by now global brands with different views on that. I found interesting that Bayern München, for example, they when they did a tour of the US, they brought one of the exhibitions about the Jewish members with them and exhibited that at the, I think, Los Angeles Memorial for the Holocaust Memorial site or museum. And I didn't really question that in that way, but obviously it is something that connects to local communities in some ways. Trying to say, okay, we have a past and a shared past, maybe. And also, it can be actually a tool. It should be usually, obviously, it should be about the idea behind that. It should be about the societal things. But you will also build your image and brand with that a bit.
Mm-hmm. I think so, right? I mean, we're the club that's engaging with the past. Honestly, that's not the worst thing to say. And
exactly, it's if you, for example,
increasingly inauthentic game, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, FC Pauli is known for certain political ideas, or it's obviously not a political party, but we have certain sense for that there shouldn't be that much discrimination and so on, and that we are relatively democratic DIY. So everything at this club is sometimes it can annoy you in some moments, but in the long run, it's saying something positive, that nothing is really simple. There's always discussions, even more discussions. And when there's no discussion, there's a discussion. But still, that's part of it as well, because we usually try to find ways that are feasible and that work in the end. And that's part of that. There's a discussion about that song, the discussion about other things of the past. That is
a lot of committees, a lot of boards, a lot of Arbeitskreise, as they say.
Yeah. And so that's basically that fits us. That's part of the identity of the club, I think. So in the process of doing it, of dealing with these things is important as well. It's not just the outcome. It's also the process that's behind it. And it's typical for us. And I think it suits us well. And that, again, might be not directly, we do research on topic A, B, C, and we get another sponsor. Yeah. But if we lose the foundation on that just built, and we just would just call out some slogans, if we just reduce that what the club stands for to some marketing phrases, then that would work for a while, but then it would break and would not work anymore. So there has to be a basis and something, that a structure that's there, and then you can communicate it and use it.
So if you're going to sell a polo shirt that says "No wine to the fascist" in your club shop, then at least you should have the research work to prove it behind you. We should say, Sönke is wearing this right now. As we speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
$30. It's on sale at the club.
Yeah, the museum is relatively big on wine. What we do with that is, because there's a political slogan on that, we put this money mostly into educational purposes, into the research of our history, and especially the problematic history, and again use it in our communication and mediation and in education programs for school children. We had 2,000 school children in workshops about democracy, about discrimination, about sexism last year, and we aim at reaching more people, because it's not just about slogans. You can use slogans to communicate what you're doing, what you're standing for, but at the end you have to do the work. There's a phrase in Germany, Antifa ist Handarbeit. It's to be anti-fascist, it requires manual work. Yeah. And like that, it's a bit like that with running a club that has a certain, or a museum that transports a certain image as well. Yeah. And that we have to do the work.
And fascism requires hands-on work. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't rely on the state. That's it was also big slogan. Yeah. The supporters were citing one of the survivors of the Holocaust, Bejarano. If you want to fight against fascism, you can't rely on the state.
Felipe, it connects a little bit to your piece as well. It's hands-on work. Hands-on work is quite a bit harder if your club is structured differently, right? If it's not the 50+1, if it's not the baseline democracy, it's just something that you remarked before. Mm-hmm. I think there is a connection here.
Definitely. And thinking about Real Madrid, to be a president, you have to have 10% of the club's budget annually in your bank account. So yeah. We're talking about 100 million euros. And so not everyone can be the president. Like
Göttlich at St. Pauli does not have that kind of money.
Yeah. But I would say, like, back to your previous question, I think by not discussing this difficult past, Real Madrid and other clubs really evidences a missed opportunity to even reduce political polarization, in the sense that along the club's history, throughout the club's history, in particular Real Madrid, they had in their how you call that, in their their ranks, socialists and nationalists from in the Spanish Civil War.
Remember, yeah.
Within the club, and there's actually one very interesting quote from Raimundo Saporta that I put in the documentary that was made by a journalist and Fernando Carreño from the newspaper Marca. And Raimundo Saporta used to say, "We in the monarchy were monarchists. We in the Franco regime were Francoists, and now in the democracy we're Democrats, or like in the monarchy we're monarchists." And that nowadays, if you check Real Madrid bylaws and missions statements, they claim themselves an apolitical club intentionally. So they really play along with the music that in the political environment is playing. So literally the main difference I would say is that Real Madrid and these other clubs, they do not, and intentionally, they do not operate as social, cultural, political organizations as St. Pauli considers itself, but more as a commercial enterprise. So if discussing the past might bring them in the future some sort of profit, they will engage. Until then, they will not.
Yeah. What reception has your movie gotten from the clubs you visited? Have you heard back? Other than from Sönke, who likes it, I assume, and who's in it?
Yeah, we did the premiere at St. Pauli Museum last November.
Yeah.
It was good. But like couple locals were there. Had some interesting discussions.
Only a couple of locals? I'm sure there were more people there.
Well, they're like 20-ish.
Yeah, that's more than a couple. Good. Yes. Good.
Yeah, no, that was really good. Let's let me use the space to thank Zonk again, and thank Fabian Fritz. Without him, I wouldn't be able to connect with Zonk and FC St. Pauli Museum, and wish he's having a good recovery from long COVID. And I know you're gonna talk to him about that.
Yes, he is. He's on in the future, Fabian.
Yeah, but like the documentary has really now getting the attention. I was invited by Globo Sport, the Brazilian biggest newspaper. We did a podcast. The newspaper Marca in Spain also published something about the documentary.
Excellent. That's good.
Very interesting. I have premiered a documentary in 5 different universities in the US and Scotland. Mm-hmm. And now I can announce that because I signed the contract 2 days ago. We have been selected to the Tercer Tiempo Fest. It's a football scene festival that is in its 8th edition. It's going to take place in Bogota, Colombia, and we are running to win the Cortita al Pie award, which is dedicated to national and international short documentaries.
Okay. So you're one of the candidates for that?
Yeah, we're one of the candidates. It's the first festival that the film has been selected. There are a couple more that we have applied. So far, around 5,500 views on YouTube, 9,000 impressions, everything without paying to boost the numbers. So organically growth, we're proud of that, and we continue with this mindset.
Yes. Link in the show notes as well, reposted on socials too. I'll be teaching a class on 20th century European history next year, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to make use of that movie. So we'll be.
Please do it. We have political science departments using cultural studies using. Yeah. So it is an interdisciplinary nature that allows the educational use of that.
And as the World Cup comes to the US, I hope that these stories that you unearthed outside of the United States make their way here and maybe broaden the discourse about what the beautiful game is here as well.
And we're gonna be uncovering more stories. I'm planning now to do a short documentary, and when I mean short, 5 to 7 minutes on Weser Stadium history as a public auction site, the Stadium of Werder Bremen. And I'm going to be recording, producing it in the summer. And also, we are going in the summer now, and Sönke is going to host us. I'm going with 9 students from Clemson and NC State. We're doing a study abroad program to learn about political activism and cultural remembrance in Germany. So we're going to be visiting not just St. Pauli, but Borussia Dortmund, Bayern Munich, HSV, and Werder Bremen. So more stories will come out, more publications, and then we can continue informing non-German audience about this important work.
Yes, as you should. Speaking of non-German, there's one American whose quote seems to fit, and it's been on my mind the last half hour or so, William Faulkner's, "The past isn't dead. It's not even past."
Yes, that's a good point to state. Yeah.
We've talked for almost 2 hours. So, okay, anything we forgot? Anything we could have possibly forgot? I'm sure there is, but
well, I just started my 200 pages that I also want to mention. No, I mean, it's a problem with these topics. You can talk for, let's say, hours and hours.
Yeah.
I think
it's
that's
an entirely different question. People are going to listen to it for hours and hours, but
that's very true. Yeah, no, I think that's. I think we didn't forget any major things. Depends on what you expected. Yeah.
Excellent. No, I'm happy. Felipe, anything that listeners should know that they haven't yet about your current work?
There's a lot. I would say there's a lot of good information. Not just that I wrote, but other researchers have done in terms of cultural remembrance and how to deal with problematic, controversial histories. Yeah. At Football Makes History website. It's a very good educational platform for teachers at high schools, middle schools, and also universities to use it. So highly recommend Football Makes History website. Those folks are from the Netherlands. Jonathan is one of the leaders.
Very good.
Yeah, very, very nice bunch of people. Some have visited here as well already. Uh-huh. Yeah. Generally, I mean, what we can obviously say, if any one of the listeners coming to St. Pauli anytime, come along and take a look at the exhibition.
Yes.
Also, maybe you can put some of the links in the show notes for further reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I highly recommend to your audience, Philip, to spend an after match at the museum with some wine and music. It's unmissable.
Wonderful. Wine and music in St. Pauli after the match. Winner.
Yes.
That's great. Sounds great. I'll be up there somewhere soon in April. I'll only see the St. Pauli women.
So why don't you get in another match? I mean, that's obviously a very good choice anyway. But
it's an away game in Kiel. My sister lives around there.
Yeah. So what? But so you don't have time to come to the match?
Well, we'll do that. We'll look that up after the recording.
Okay.
But for now, let listeners know if we did meet in person. For now, thank you so much for a lot of time spent on this. We started with a little song and ended with some big questions of our time. Thank you both for the work, and thank you for the time. It was lovely.
Dankeschön. Did I say it right?
Yeah, perfect.
You did. Gern geschehen.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
Ich möchte mich in die Ecke verkriechen, aber